Welcome, everybody. This is To Your Greatness with Dawn Mathis, and I am Dawn Mathis, the owner and founder of InSitu LifeWorks. And we have an amazing guest today. This is Rick Griggs, who's joining us. He is the founder of Griggs Achievement Training and Retreats. And after working in management at the National Semiconductor and Intel, he began his own company in 1983, teaching people how to jumpstart their humanity to reach high business goals. He instructs on a blend of balance, innovation, and leadership. Armed with degrees in psychology, French, and business behavior analysis, Rick has trained thousands of people, including Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory employees, folks at Stanford University, the American Animal Hospital Association, the American Dental Association, Anheuser-Busch, Cisco Systems, Good Samaritan Society, and a number of city and county government institutions. Whew. Rick is also an award-winning author and has written 8 books. His 7th book, Triumph in Teams, won a first-place book award. In addition to consulting in the United States, Rick has also consulted globally. He speaks fluent French, some German, and apparently enough Spanish to get into trouble. I can relate to the Spanish part and getting into trouble. So we have a common thread there. So, wow. Welcome, Rick. There was so much to read about you that if I read it all, we would only have about 5 minutes for content. So I hope what I gleaned gives everyone a feel for the value that Rick can bring to us today. So welcome, Rick.
Well, thank you, Dawn. It's a pleasure being here, and great job picking a few things that might be of interest to the listeners.
Yes, I think so. So here's kind of this is something I really wanted to talk to you about, because one of the topics that I coach into, and a point that I love to talk about with guests for the benefit of our listeners is something that we call the hero's journey. And what that means is that's a part of life that something changed for us, whether it was catastrophic or just a life change, something that changes the trajectory of your life and maybe had you go off into a different direction. And so you alluded in some of your biography to a tragedy you witnessed in the Silicon Valley, and that from there you developed your world-class set of balanced mastery modules. Can you tell us a bit about that story?
You bet, Dawn. In a way, it's kind of, I want to say it's a pleasure to talk about the story, but it was a tragedy at the time, and it's still a tragedy in my mind. But if I keep it short, I have another one jumping off a bridge in France that if this first one's a little bit of a downer, we can add a second one for your listeners. This happened many years ago. I was just out of graduate school working at National Semiconductor in Silicon Valley, California. I thought I'd made it, and with my master's degree, and I was doing the work that I had been studying in school. And one time I had to teach a productivity class to the night shift, so I was teaching all night. I got off work at about 5 a.m, got my stuff, and I was ready to walk back across the street to my office in the Human Resources building. And it was 5:30, 5:45 in the morning, Dawn, and I see a person going into the building before sunrise, and I'll use the name Ruth. And she's going into work early in the morning, and I had seen her there the night before. And I just had to take a detour and walk past her desk that morning. There's nobody else in the building. And I said, Ruth, what are you doing here so early? I saw you working late last night. How come you're here so early? And she says, Rick, I've got to show that I'm a no-nonsense manager, that I can keep up. And at the time, she was a rare female manager in Silicon Valley. And she says, I've got to keep up with the men. I have so much to do. And I remember telling her, well, don't work too hard. And I said goodbye. And I went and put all my stuff at my desk. I went home and slept for the morning or into early afternoon because I'd worked all night. I got back to the building, to the location on Kiefer Avenue, heart of Silicon Valley. And there's an ambulance in the parking lot. The doors flung open, and they carried someone down on a gurney and bounced them down the stairs. Now, in a horrible situation, it's funny what you remember, but it was Ruth. She'd had a heart attack at her desk during lunch that day, and they carted her out, and the ambulance just kind of slowly drove down the street. And I talked to one of the vice presidents in the lobby, and I said, isn't this happening a little too often around here? And he looked down at me. He was a big, tall guy, looked down at me. He says, Griggs, used by my last name, he says, with our numbers, it's not a big issue. And she died that afternoon. I was paralyzed. I was so struck with, first, the callousness. I know he was talking statistics, but I saw her go into work that morning, and I saw them carry her out at 2 o'clock that afternoon. And it struck me like a ton of bricks. And that night, I decided I was going to start a business that would take the balance in your life, the personal side, and the achievement or the mastery or all the skills we want to use to make money. And I was just going to try to put them together. And with her losing her life, and she wasn't the only one, that changed my trajectory. It changed my life's work. That was over 3 decades ago, and I have not wavered. Sometimes I wished I could waver and go into another business or something. But as of that day, I had a calling for what I call balanced mastery.
Wow. Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is that, statistics are just about numbers, but I'm a person.
Yes.
And however, you're right. Corporate America, corporate anywhere, it's a numbers game, and I'm so sorry that happened to Ruth. And you're absolutely right. It happens a lot. We hear about it in coaching, where people have, because they're not living their purpose or because they're not balanced, they're actually sick.
Absolutely.
They're not well. They don't sleep well. They're not living the life they would love to live. They check their soul at the door. Mm-hmm. And we hear stories like that all the time. And I'm sure in your work, and wow, you've been doing this since 1983. I'm sure you have heard it over and over and over again. It's epidemic. It's pandemic.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
I would. And I've seen too many notices on the lobby door that someone expired over the last few days. When I've gone to a company to teach a class and I find out one of their employees died, and not to stay on the negative part of that, but to me, it's like if in coaching with Peggy, with my clients, if we can give them a choice, Dawn, if we can say you don't have to pick just the balance and personal stuff or just the achievement and lots of money in the bank, that you don't have to pick one of those, because both of those by themselves are dead ends. In my belief system, you have to be a really well-rounded person And that includes the balance side, but it also includes the achievement. And if we can figure out a way to do both and to teach that, we're doing good with our time on this earth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like, when I received my coaching training, we talked about both and. That you don't have to shoot for just achievement at the expense of your health.
Right.
You can have the life you love and achieve as well. It's a both and, not an either or.
Absolutely. I love it.
So we're talking here about people literally dying at work. So the word that kept coming up for me when I was reading your information and your bio was the word balance.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define balance?
I do it in a couple of different ways that are a little non-traditional. What I stay away from, and I know sometimes this hurts people's feelings, I stay away from the term work-life balance, only because when I was in the corporate setting, I saw that a lot of people, they didn't take it seriously. They thought it was, in some cases, they thought it was a waste of time from the corporate standpoint, from the corporation's goals and aspirations. They looked at it as something we have to do. And I look at balance as it's a combination of balance and achievement. And when those are together, that's the kind of balance I'm talking about. And I think we might chat about this, my mastery circle, in a little bit, where I have you pick the priorities in your life. But that's also hitting on the kind of balance. Whenever I think of balance, I think you have a responsibility to be a well-rounded achiever at the same time. That's what people needed to hear in corporations, that it wasn't just work-life balance, that there was an achiever component to it, that there was mastery, that we've got to teach balance, but we've also got to teach achievement so people don't end up working 10 hours a day to get 6 hours of work done. I mean, that's what gives you the time with your family, the time with your hobbies, the time to play a little piano or to have a koi pond and still be a great achiever. That's my belief. When you say balance, I immediately factor in the achievement part of it at the same time. I hope that kind of answers.
Yeah, I think so. So what you're saying is working smarter so that it doesn't take you as long to do the job necessarily.
Absolutely. And it doesn't take rocket science to learn some good tools. There are people in every profession who are at the top of their game, who are masters in the field. And by the way, real masters, they never say they're masters. They're always achieving. They're always working towards refining their skills. But that component of learning how to do your work better in less time, and I believe in forcing the hours. Anybody can work 12 hours. I saw it so much, 10, 12 hours a day. I get nervous when I hear that's what someone's doing. When somebody tells me they haven't taken a vacation in years, I just cringe because I know that's going to explode down the road. The well-rounded lifestyle includes the responsibility to be an efficient achiever without killing yourself. And the tools are out there. We've just got to bring them together and do our marketing well enough that we get a chance to go inside of organizations or to work with individuals to teach them some of these skills. A lot of people think they already know it. And unfortunately, I hope I don't get into trouble here, but a lot of men think that, they can't go to that softer side. They can't ever say the word balance or be a well-rounded human being. They've got to be a super achiever, Superman. And I know that's it's not a strict gender issue, but I've just run into a lot of men who don't want to go to the training or learn how to do both that balance and achievement.
Yeah.
No judgment, just my observations.
Sure. Well, and you've been doing it long enough, so if you see a trend, it's we appreciate you pointing that out to us. So, what are some of the most common imbalances you see when you go into a corporation or a business? What's the glaring thing that you can tell us that you see? So maybe it'll make the listeners and myself a little more aware of, hey, maybe we should watch out for this.
I'll tell you, Dawn, that's a really insightful question. What I see most often is people being praised for overworking, praised for being fanatical, where there's an award for people who go overboard. And that becomes the norm, where people leave their cars in the parking lots late at night over the weekend, or they text and they do things that show that they're working more than they need to work.
Wow. I think I might have been one of those people when I was in corporate America. If I worked 12 hours or did something like that. And you're right. I mean, that's kind of cultural at many places of business, and it's bragging rights. So one of the things that I noticed that you were talking about in the Balanced Mastery was that balance alone doesn't work. What did you mean by that, and what's missing?
Okay. It gets complicated, but on the employer side, when you just look at balance, the impression is that people are going to take their time and do things that aren't supporting the organization. On an individual side, when people just look at balance, they're thinking they're going to lose out on some marketing, on some networking, on some client engagement, because they're doing things that make them a fully functioning human being. And that's a wrong way to look at it. If you take it in a way that you being a well-rounded person helps make you a fully functioning human being, everything else you do will be better. You will achieve more if you're a well-rounded person. But it doesn't just mean goofing off. It doesn't mean just golfing or just doing hobbies all the time. Anything in excess, of course, is going to be dangerous. It's going to create maybe some laziness or missed opportunities. That balance, that back and forth of the achievement side and the personal, well-rounded side, to me, that's the magic formula. You have to have both.
So from an employer's perspective, what would you like to see more employers doing or saying or encouraging from their employees?
Okay. Another excellent question. To me, the answer jumps out like a neon sign. Set the example of being a well-rounded human being. Don't sneak off and go on vacation. Let your employees know you're going to take Friday afternoon off. Let your employees know you're going to go do something to recreate, to re-energize yourself. And the few really good leaders that aren't afraid to do that, I believe I see their businesses mushroom. I see their relationship to their employees mushroom. Now, some people will take advantage. Okay, there's a percentage out of every group. But by and large, seeing that the leadership sets the example of being a well-rounded human being, that would be the number one thing, Don, that over my few years in the business would make a huge improvement.
And then the employees would follow suit. Like, it's okay to take a day off here and there because even the boss does it.
Exactly right. And Don, there's so many statistics. There's so many anecdotal stories, so many well-designed experimental studies that show the people who do that, the people who take time with their families, the people who take time to exercise, who have a hobby, the best leaders I've seen in my years. One was at Lucent Technologies, one was at Hewlett Packard. And these folks, I mean, one time this leader flew back home from a conference we were doing in Reno. So it was about an hour flight. He flew home for his son's birthday party during the conference and flew back to the conference after he attended his son's birthday party. I mean, I love the guy. I want to hug him. And he's the kind of example I'd like to see for most employees that they're yearning for an example of good leadership that shows balance and mastery together.
Love it. Love it. So you alluded to something called the top 5 priorities principle.
Yes.
And I know we don't have a whole lot of time, and I know your course is, weeks long. So, is there? Can you just talk about that, the top 5 priorities principle, just so we have an idea of some of the things that maybe people could start thinking about?
Okay, excellent. If I'm asked, Rick, what's the one thing I can do to improve my balance and mastery in my life? What's the one thing I can do? I say pick your top 5 priorities. Pick your top 5 priorities and honor them. Not 3 or 4, not 6 or 7 or 8, top 5. And we call that the mastery circle. And I put that in a book called Personal Wellness many years ago, and I've used it all over the world. If we can get people to at least have 5 top priorities or goals or aspirations, one, that helps you to avoid being a single-focused person. Single-focused people cause trouble, and they spew it on everybody around them. It does lots of damage. So this forces you to make sure you have 5 different priorities. And what you start to learn is that it's like the other 4, you've got one big one, maybe making lots of money, being successful, but the other 4 are like a life vest for you. When the world gets tough, when you feel your self-esteem sinking, when you feel that you're insignificant in this big world, especially with the social media, when you have those other 4 priorities, maybe it's piano, maybe it's cycling, maybe it's travel, it might be a significant other, or it might be family as one. When you have the other 4, something magical happens with your personality, with your batteries being recharged, and with how you tackle what you do for a living. I will guarantee that person will be a different person when they focus on their top 5 priorities. We call it the mastery circle.
The mastery circle. Well, that kind of ties in with the last question I was going to ask you, and I think you just answered it. What can our audience do? A step that we can all take, and it sounds like do some thinking and come up with those 5 priorities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to say that we're going to have your contact information and how people can learn more about your mastery programs. We'll have those in the speaker's notes for people so that they can find you and access this brilliant work of yours.
Oh, thank you, Dawn.
Heck, I think I might be one of your next students. I'm just very, very enthralled with this information, and I think we need to get the word out to a lot more of our industries and our corporations, because I don't miss corporate America at all.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it would be great to get in there. Yeah.
Yes. Do I have time for a 30-second story?
You do.
Okay. To balance the one we started with Ruth, I want to tell you about and your listeners about jump-starting your humanity. And I'll squish this down. I was in France. I'd lived there for a while, and I was camping. And I went through this town called Le Havre, and the Seine River runs through it. And there's a big bridge going over the river. And I see this kid up on the bridge, and he's getting his nerve up to jump off this bridge. And he jumps off the bridge and goes through the air, hits the water, and comes out. And he said, I ran up to him. I said, "What did you just do? You scared me half to death." And he looks up and he says, "You want to see me do it again? Sometimes you just have to have fun." And the kid jumped off the bridge again, and it was contagious. So I gave him my camera, my French francs at the time, my car keys, and I went to the top. I looked off and I said, "I can't jump off. I'm bigger than he is. I will die and go out to the English Channel." I finally got my nerve up and I jumped off the bridge, and I hit the water. I came back up, and I was sizzling. Laughing like this 12-year-old kid. And what I learned that day that I try to get across to people is sometimes we've got to jumpstart the humanity in our lives. It's been covered up with all kinds of work and duty and taxes and pandemics. We've got to do something that jumpstart that humanity that we were born with. And it sounds like in your work, you are trying to get that across to people. In my work, and there's a 12-year-old kid that taught me how to be human again by jumping off a bridge.
Wow. I love that. I bet you felt alive after you jumped and came up, and you lived through it. So yeah. Wow. Kid. Well, you know, I think being a kid and watching kids can remind us about jumpstarting our humanity by being more childlike.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, man, I wish we had like 2 hours, because I'm just enjoying this so much. And unfortunately, we have to sign off. Rick, I will be in touch with you because I want to talk more with you, and I'm certain that some of our audience will be reaching out to you as well. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your talent, your brilliance, your heart, and your time.
Thank you so much, Dawn. It's a pleasure when I get to talk about this. It honors Ruth from many, many years ago, and I pledge that I will spend my life honoring her.
Well, so I think Ruth knows that. I think she sees you. She hears you. She's got your back. And I so appreciate you and your story about Ruth and about the 12-year-old boy. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining us. This has been To Your Greatness with Dawn Mathis and with my guest, Rick Griggs.